High in the Chiricahua Mountains, where winter winds slice through bone, a young woman named Morning Star kneels in the snow. Her fingers, raw and bleeding, scrape at the frozen ground. The tribe's judgment weighs heavier than the cold. A broken marriage promise, a shattered future. With each strike of her makeshift tools against the ice, she carves deeper into what she believes will be her final resting place. But fate has other plans. Through the swirling snow appears a figure, tall, proud, wrapped in furs. His voice carries ancient wisdom as he speaks in the old tongue. Not today, daughter of the earth. His weathered hand extends toward her, offering something she thought lost forever, hope. Will Morning Star find the strength to rise from her icy grave and reclaim her place among her people? Before we dive deeper into this tale of redemption, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's chapter holds something truly special. The makeshift ice pick falls from Morning Star's fingers, its bone handle worn smooth from hours of desperate labor. Her eyes, dark as mountain caves, fix upon the warrior's outstretched hand. Behind him, the winter wind howls through the Chiricahua peaks, carrying memories she has tried so hard to bury beneath the ice. 3 moons ago, she had sat in her grandmother's lodge, silver morning light streaming through smoke holes as her fingers danced across the wedding blanket she was weaving. Each thread carried prayers for harmony, for children, for a future bright as summer berries. The women of her family gathered around, their voices soft as they shared ancient wisdom of marriage and motherhood. Her mother, Grey Dove, watched, with eyes that held both pride and worry, knowing the weight of tradition that rested upon her daughter's shoulders. "Your hands speak the old language," Grey Dove had whispered, touching the intricate patterns emerging on the loom. "Each weave is a story, each knot a promise to our ancestors." Morning Star had nodded, her heart full of hope and fear in equal measure. She was to marry Swift Arrow, a match arranged by the tribal council to unite 2 respected families. Though she had only spoken with him briefly during ceremonies, his reputation as a skilled hunter and respectful son gave her comfort. The blanket had taken 4 moons to complete, every dawn, finding Morning Star at her loom before the day's first light touched the mountains. Into its fabric, she wove the sacred patterns passed down through generations. Lightning bolts for protection, eagle feathers for wisdom, flowing rivers for prosperity. Between these traditional designs, she had dared to add her own touches. Tiny morning stars, barely visible unless one knew where to look, representing her deepest hopes. "Such fine work," the elder women had murmured, running weathered fingers over the finished piece. "The spirits themselves must have guided your hands." Morning Star had accepted their praise with proper humility, but inside, her spirit soared like the falcons that rode the winter winds. This blanket would be her masterpiece, her gift, not just to her future husband, but to the continuing story of their people. Now that same blanket lay buried, somewhere beneath the snow, torn and discarded like her dreams. The memory of its destruction burns hotter than the cold that numbs her limbs. Swift Arrow had refused her, not with gentle words or regretful explanation, but with public scorn that cut deeper than any blade. Before the entire tribe, he had declared her family cursed, claiming his dreams were filled with warnings from the ancestors. The warrior before her shifts slightly, his fur-wrapped form blocking the worst of the wind. His eyes, deep and knowing, seem to read the pain written across her heart. When he speaks again, his voice carries the warmth of summer pine smoke. "The threads of our lives sometimes tangle, daughter, but even a broken loom can be mended." Morning Star's chapped lips part, tasting copper where they've split in the cold. "Some breaks cannot be mended, grandfather. Some stains cannot be washed away." Her voice emerges rough from hours of silence, barely louder than the wind's moan. His response comes with the certainty of mountain stone. "I am called Running Wolf, and I have seen many winters. Tell me, child, do you believe the snow stains the earth forever, or does spring always return to wash it clean?" She looks down at her bloody hands, at the half-carved hollow in the ice that was to be her grave. The warrior's words stir something deep within her, a flutter of wings against the cage of her despair. But the memory of the tribe's whispers, their sidelong glances and turned backs, threatens to freeze that fragile warmth. Yet Running Wolf stands patient as the mountains themselves, his presence as solid as the sacred peaks that have sheltered their people since time beyond memory. In his weathered face, Morning Star sees not judgment but understanding, not pity, but possibility. Perhaps, like the morning star itself, there might be light waiting on the other side of this longest night. The ceremonial drum sits silent in the lodge of the tribal elders, its voice stilled since that fateful day. Morning Star remembers its steady heartbeat as she had walked toward her future, her wedding blanket draped across her arms like wings. The memory rises unbidden as she stands with Running Wolf in the swirling snow. "It was to be at first light," she finds herself saying, the words spilling forth like spring melt. "The sacred time when night and day embrace." Her fingers trace patterns in the air, ghost-weaving the moments as they unfold in her mind. The entire tribe had gathered. Even the bands who winter in the low valleys had traveled up for the joining of our families. The morning had dawned, clear and cold, the kind of crystalline day that makes the mountains seem closer to the spirit world than the earth. Smoke from ceremonial fires rose straight and true toward the sky, carrying prayers to the ancestors. The medicine woman had blessed Morning Star with sage smoke and eagle feathers, painting sacred symbols on her forehead with red ochre. I saw the signs, the old woman had whispered as she worked, but I did not understand their meaning until too late. Now Morning Star wonders what warnings the spirits had sent, what omens she had been too blind with hope to see. Swift Arrow had stood, proud before the tribal council, his family arranged behind him like arrows in a quiver. His father, Black Bear, wore the medals of a proven warrior, and his mother, Singing Brook, was known for her healing songs. They were everything Morning Star's family had hoped for in an alliance. Running Wolf's voice breaks gently into her. Memories. I remember Black Bear from the wars with the white soldiers, a brave man, but one who sees strength only in drawn bows, never in bent ones. There's something in his tone that makes Morning Star look up sharply, but his face reveals nothing more than patient attention. Swift Arrow waited until I stood before him, she continues, each word heavy as stone. Waited until I held out the blanket, my offering, my promise. Then he spoke of dreams. Her voice catches. He said the ancestors came to him in darkness, that they showed him visions of a cursed union. He spoke of my father's death in the fever season, how no medicine could save him. Said it was a sign of spirits turned against our family. The wind keens between them, carrying ice crystals that sting like angry wasps. He said these things before all the people, before my mother, who still mourns her beloved, before my younger sisters, who now bear the weight of his words. Anger flames briefly in her chest, warming her more than any fire. Then he turned his back, and his family followed, and the drum... She gestures helplessly. The drum fell silent. Running Wolf stands quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes focused on something distant. When he speaks, his words carry the weight of seasons. In the old days, before the white man's wars pushed us into these mountains, such an insult would have brought swift justice. But we live in different times now. The old ways bend like river reeds in the storm. They whisper that I am cursed, Morning Star says, her voice barely audible above the wind. That my father's spirit wanders lost, unable to find peace, and his restlessness taints our bloodline. The children are kept from me, as if misfortune might catch like fever, even the ceremonies. She stops, the pain too fresh to voice. And so you came here, Running Wolf gestures to the half-carved grave, to make your own ceremony. What else remains? She asks, but the question holds less certainty than before. The warrior's presence has somehow shifted the mountain's shadow, letting through fragments of light she thought forever lost. He reaches into his fur wrappings and withdraws something that catches the weak winter sun, a small drum, no larger than his palm. Its surface is decorated with symbols Morning Star has never seen, yet somehow understands. Destiny, choice, renewal. The old songs tell us that when the great cold came, our ancestors survived not by fighting the ice, but by learning its lessons, Running Wolf says, holding out the drum. They discovered that sometimes we must go deep into winter's heart to find spring's first warmth. Morning Star hesitates, then takes the drum. Its surface thrums beneath her fingers, warm despite the freezing air, alive with possibilities she had thought forever buried. Running Wolf watches her with eyes that have seen 100 seasons turn, and in them she begins to see a path she never knew existed. There are other ways to honor the ancestors, he says softly, other ceremonies that do not require a grave. Running Wolf reaches into his fur-wrapped clothing and withdraws a small medicine pouch, its leather darkened with age and decorated with intricate beadwork that catches what little light filters through the snow-heavy clouds. The designs speak of ancient power, dancing spirits and sacred mountains woven in patterns that make Morning Star's fingers itch with recognition. Before I was Running Wolf, he begins, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. I was called Broken Stone. He settles onto a snow-covered boulder, gesturing for Morning Star to join him. Despite the bitter cold, the stone beneath them holds a strange warmth, as if heated from within by the earth's own heart. I, too, once stood before our people in shame, he continues, untying the medicine pouch with careful movements. Not for a broken marriage, but for a broken spirit. In my youth, I was meant to lead a war party against those who threatened our lands. But in the moment of battle, fear gripped me. I froze like ice, and 3 young warriors died because of my weakness. Morning Star feels her breath catch. Everyone knows Running Wolf as a respected elder, a warrior whose wisdom is sought by even the most prestigious tribal leaders. To imagine him as a failed warrior, branded by cowardice, it seems impossible. The tribe's judgment was swift, he says, opening the pouch. Inside something gleams, herbs and small crystals, each carefully wrapped in strips of white buckskin. I was stripped of my name, my position, my right to speak in council. Some called for my banishment. Others whispered that death would better serve the tribe's honor. He selects a bundle of herbs, their sharp, pine-like scent cutting through the winter air. But there was one, an old medicine woman named White Feather, who saw beyond the surface of shame. She spoke of an ancient prophecy, one that told of warriors who must first be broken before they could become whole. Morning Star leans forward despite herself, drawn by both the story and the mysterious contents of the medicine pouch. Running Wolf continues, his words carrying the weight of lived truth. White Feather took me into the mountains, much like these. For 7 days and 7 nights, she guided me through ceremonies that had been old when our grandparents were young. She showed me that what I thought was weakness was actually a door to understanding power in a different way. He unwraps the herb bundle, revealing leaves that seem to shimmer with their own inner light. These are sacred plants that grow only in hidden valleys, where the sun touches earth for just 1 hour each day. White Feather taught me their songs, their stories, their power to bridge the world of spirits and the world of flesh. A gust of wind swirls around them, carrying ice crystals that dance like stars in the grey light. Through these medicines, I learned to see my fear not as a curse, but as wisdom I had not yet understood. I learned that true strength often wears the mask of weakness, just as spring first appears as winter's defeat. He holds out a single leaf to Morning Star. Despite the freezing temperature, it remains supple and green, pulsing with life. The poor prophecy White Feather shared spoke not just of warriors, but of all our people. It told of times when the old ways would seem to fail us, when the path ahead would disappear beneath snow and shadow. But it also spoke of those who would find new ways to honor the ancient truths, those who would learn to weave spirit and earth together in patterns never before seen. Morning Star takes the leaf with trembling fingers. The moment it touches, her skin, warmth spreads up her arm, and with it comes a vision. She sees herself standing before a great loom, but instead of thread, she weaves with strands of starlight and shadow, creating patterns that tell stories no one has yet dared to tell. Your wounded heart, Running Wolf says softly. Your broken dreams. These are not endings, Morning Star. They are doorways. The ancestors did not guide me to you by chance. The same prophecy that saved me now calls to you. He begins to sing, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow filling the entire mountain with sound. The song is old, older than any morning Star has heard in the tribal ceremonies. Its rhythms complex as snowflakes, its words in a dialect so ancient she understands them more with her spirit than her mind. As he sings, the medicine pouch's other contents catch the light, crystals that hold the colors of dawn and dusk, feathers from birds Morning Star has never seen, small bones polished to pearl-like luminescence. Each item pulses with power, telling its own story of transformation and renewal. The tribe believes Swift Arrow's dreams were warnings, Running Wolf says when the song fades. Perhaps they were, but not in the way he thinks. Perhaps the ancestors were not warning him about you, but trying to show him a truth he was not ready to see. Morning Star looks down at the leaf in her palm, then at the half-carved grave in the ice. The contrast strikes her suddenly as profound. Death and life, endings and beginnings, all intertwined like the sacred patterns in her weaving. There is another path, Running Wolf says, beginning to return the sacred items to his pouch. One that leads not to this grave you've carved, but to heights you cannot yet imagine. The prophecy speaks of one who will bridge worlds, not just between our people and the spirits, but between the old ways and the new dreams that our children will need to survive. He stands, offering his hand once again. The choice is yours. Daughter of earth and stars, will you die here in the ice, or will you follow me to the sacred places where Whitefeather once led a broken warrior, where ancient medicines still grow in hidden valleys, where your true ceremony waits? The wind holds its breath, the mountains watch, and Morning Star, her fingers still warm from the sacred leaf, feels something shift deep within her spirit. Like ice breaking in spring, like the first light of dawn touching darkness, like the moment when thread becomes pattern, becomes story. Morning Star's fingers close around Running Wolf's offered hand. His grip is warm, strong, an anchor in the swirling snow. As she rises, he reaches down with his other hand and retrieves a carved walking staff that had been hidden beneath the snow. Its surface is worn smooth by years of use, decorated with spiral patterns that seem to move in the shifting light. The first step, he says, presenting her with the staff, is often the hardest. This belonged to Whitefeather. She said it would find its way to the next walker between worlds. The wood feels alive against her palm, thrumming with memories of countless journeys. Morning Star's artist's eye traces the intricate carvings. She recognizes some as traditional symbols, but others are unlike anything she's seen in the tribe's art. They remind her of the way shadows dance on canyon walls at twilight, of how starlight ripples in mountain streams. We follow the wind's path, Running Wolf says, already moving through the deepening snow, where the eagles nest and the hidden valleys keep their secrets. His voice carries back to her, steady as a heartbeat. Watch how I place my feet. The mountain speaks through its silence. Morning Star finds herself following, the staff helping her navigate the treacherous ground. With each step, the half-carved grave recedes behind them, becoming nothing more than another shadow on the mountainside. The wind that had seemed so bitter now carries hints of pine and sage, and something else, something ancient and wild that makes her blood sing. They climb higher, following a path that seems to exist more in Running Wolf's memory than in any physical trail. He moves with the surety of one who has walked these ways countless times, reading signs invisible to untrained eyes. Sometimes he pauses to touch a particular tree or rock, murmuring words in that old dialect that resonates in Morning Star's spirit. The ancestors, he explains during one such stop, left markers for those who would follow, not just in the earth, but in the way wind shapes stone, in how trees grow, in the flight patterns of birds. He points to a seemingly random cluster of boulders. "Look there. What do you see?" At first, Morningstar sees only snow-covered rocks, but as she lets her eyes unfocus, the way she does when finding patterns for her weaving, something emerges. The boulders form a shape, like a great bird with outstretched wings, its head pointing toward a narrow cleft in the cliffs above. "The eagle's guide," Running Wolf nods approvingly. "One of many signs White Feather taught me to read. The old ones knew that wisdom, like water, must find its own path down the mountain. They left these trails for those who would need them most." As they climb higher, Morningstar begins to notice other signs, subtle arrangements of stone and tree that speak in a language older than words. Her artist's eye, trained by years of working with patterns and symbols, starts to recognize recurring themes, spirals that mirror the path of sun and stars, lines that flow like water over stone, shapes that echo the flight of birds and the movement of wind. The staff becomes more than just a walking aid. Its carved symbols seem to respond to each marker they pass, as if participating in an ancient conversation. Morningstar finds herself running her fingers over its patterns during their brief rests, each touch revealing new depths to the designs. "White Feather spoke of the staff's power," Running Wolf says, watching her explore the carvings. "She said it remembers every journey it has witnessed, every transformation it has supported. In the old days, such staffs were carved by those who walked between worlds, medicine people, storytellers, dreamers who could see beyond the veil of ordinary life. A sudden gust of wind brings the sharp scent of winter roses, impossible at this altitude, in this season, yet the fragrance is unmistakable, carrying with it memories of spring ceremonies and healing rituals. Morningstar looks around in wonder, but sees only snow and stone. "Ah," Running Wolf smiles, "the mountain welcomes you. Such scents are messages from the spirit world, reminders that what we see with our eyes is only the smallest part of what exists." He adjusts his path slightly, heading toward a dark line of pines. "Come, there is a place ahead where we must rest and prepare for the next phase of our journey." As they walk, Morningstar feels something shifting inside her, like ice breaking up in a spring-swollen stream. The grief and shame that had driven her to carve her grave don't disappear, but they begin to transform, becoming something different, something that feels more like strength than weakness. She thinks of her weaving, of how a single thread means little on its own, but when woven with others, creates patterns that tell entire stories. Perhaps her pain, her broken dreams, are just single threads in a larger design she cannot yet see. The staff pulses warmly in her hand, as if confirming this thought. Running Wolf leads them into the shelter of the pines. The trees are ancient, their branches creating a cathedral-like space where the snow barely reaches the ground. The air here feels different, thicker, charged with something that makes the hair on Morningstar's arms rise beneath her clothing. "This is a threshold place," Running Wolf says softly, his voice carrying despite the wind that still howls above the trees. "Here, White Feather began my true teaching, and here we will begin yours. For just as I had to learn to transform fear into wisdom, you must learn to weave despair into hope, not just for yourself, but for all those who will follow the path you create." In the Cathedral of Ancient Pines, Running Wolf builds a small fire. The flames cast dancing shadows that seem alive, moving with purpose across the snow-dusted ground. From his medicine pouch, he removes a single feather, its color shifting between black and gold as it catches the firelight. "The falcon," he explains, holding the feather so it intersects with the smoke rising from their fire, "flies between worlds. Neither eagle nor hawk, it charts its own path through the sky. Our ancestors said that falcons were the first to teach us about walking between shadows and light." The smoke curls around the feather in impossible ways, forming patterns that remind Morningstar of her wedding blanket's designs. But these shapes move and change, telling stories she can almost, but not quite, understand. Watch, Running Wolf instructs, his voice taking on that ancient cadence again. The smoke speaks in the old language, the one your hands remember when they weave. Morningstar leans forward, letting her artist's eye unfocus the way it does. When she searches for new patterns in her weaving, the smoke shifts, and suddenly she sees them, images forming and dissolving like dreams at dawn. A woman dancing with shadows, a bird made of starlight, a loom strung with threads of lightning. "I see," she whispers, but the words catch in her throat as something moves in the forest behind them. She turns, expecting to see deer or perhaps a mountain lion drawn by their fire. Instead, she glimpses something that makes her heart stop. Figures, moving through the trees, glowing faintly like moonlight through ice. "The ancestors walk freely here," Running Wolf says calmly, as if seeing spirits is as natural as watching clouds cross the sky. "This place remembers them, just as the staff remembers its journeys, just as your hands remember the old patterns." The spirit figures draw closer, their forms becoming clearer. Morningstar recognizes the clothing they wear, styles she's seen in the oldest stories painted on canyon walls. Their faces are neither young nor old, and their eyes hold the wisdom of centuries. One of them, a woman wearing a dress decorated with spiral patterns, steps forward. Though her feet don't quite touch the ground, the spiritual weight of her presence makes the air itself feel heavier. She looks at Morningstar with eyes that seem to contain entire galaxies. "White feather," Running Wolf says softly, bowing his head in respect. The spirit woman smiles, and Morningstar feels warmth spread through her body despite the winter. Cold. White Feather's voice, when it comes, sounds like wind through summer grass. The pattern changes, but the weave remains strong. She gestures, and the smoke from their fire transforms into a giant loom hanging in the air. On it, Morningstar sees her own life being woven, threads of joy and sorrow, triumph and despair, all creating a design more beautiful than anything she's ever imagined. "Your shame," White Feather's voice continues, "is merely a dark thread in a larger pattern. Without shadow, light has no meaning. Without sorrow, joy cannot be known. You were not cursed, child. You were chosen." The other spirits move closer, each one carrying something. A bowl of starlight, a blanket woven from dawn's first rays, a drum made from thunder. They begin to sing, their voices harmonizing in that ancient dialect that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to the soul. Morningstar feels tears freeze on her cheeks as the song wraps around her. It speaks of transformation, of walking between worlds, of finding strength in broken places. The falcon feather in Running Wolf's hand begins to glow, its light pulsing, in time with the spiritual chorus. The prophecy, Running Wolf translates, though Morningstar finds she understands more with each passing moment, speaks of one who will weave new dreams from old memories, who will bridge the space between what was and what must be. White Feather approaches Morningstar, her spiritual form radiating power and peace in equal measure. She reaches out, and though she has no physical form, Morningstar feels the touch on her forehead, like a kiss of spring sunlight. Suddenly, Morningstar's consciousness expands. She sees through time itself, sees her ancestors creating the first sacred patterns, sees generations of medicine people and artists maintaining the bridge between worlds, sees future children learning new ways to keep the old wisdom alive. "You thought your gift was only for weaving blankets," White Feather's voice echoes in her mind. "But you were born to weave much more, to weave together past and future, spirit and flesh, broken dreams and new visions." The vision fades slowly, like mist burning away in morning sun. The spirits recede into the forest, their song lingering in the air like the memory of summer. Only White Feather remains for a moment longer, her spiritual form gradually merging with the shadows between trees. "Remember," her voice whispers on the wind, "the greatest patterns often begin with a broken thread." When Morningstar can focus on the physical world again, she finds the falcon feather resting in her lap. Though she never saw Running Wolf place it there, it thrums with power, warm to the touch, despite the freezing air. The fire has burned down to embers that cast just enough light to see Running Wolf's knowing smile. Now, he says, your real training begins. Dawn breaks over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. Morning Star follows Running Wolf through a narrow canyon, the falcon feather, now woven into her hair, its presence warm against her scalp, despite the bitter cold. The carved staff makes a soft clicking sound against stone as they walk, almost like a heartbeat. The sacred spring lies ahead, Running Wolf says, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. Since the beginning of our people, it has been a place of power, where the earth's blood meets the sky's tears. He pauses, touching a wall of rock that sparkles with ice crystals. But reaching it requires more than just walking. The spring chooses who may drink from its waters. They round a bend in the canyon, and Morning Star stops, her breath catching. Before them stands a sheet of ice, taller than 10 men, its surface rippling with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Deep purples, impossible blues, greens that pulse like northern lights. The Guardian, Running Wolf explains, touching the clay vessel that hangs at his hip. The spring lies behind this wall, but the ice, he lets the sentence hang meaningful in the air. Morning Star approaches the ice wall, drawn by its otherworldly beauty. In its surface, she sees reflections, but not of herself and Running Wolf. Instead, she sees moments from her life, weaving her first blanket, learning the sacred patterns. From her grandmother, the day of her father's death, the failed wedding ceremony. The ice shows us what we carry. Running Wolf's voice comes from behind her. The weight of our past, the burden of our fears. To reach the spring, you must find a way through, not around, not over, but through. She reaches out to touch the ice, and the images shift. Now she sees Swift Arrow turning his back, sees the whispers and pointed fingers of the tribe, sees herself kneeling in the snow, carving her own grave. The shame and pain feel fresh as new wounds. How? She asks, her voice barely a whisper. How can I pass through solid ice? What does the weaver know of patterns? Running Wolf responds with another question. What does the artist understand about seeing what others cannot? Morning Star stares at the ice wall, letting her vision soften the way it does when she works at her loom. Slowly, the painful images begin to blur, and beneath them, she starts to see something else, a pattern in the ice itself, a rhythm of light and shadow that reminds her of the designs she weaves. The falcon feather in her hair grows warmer. Following an instinct she doesn't quite understand, she removes it and holds it up to the ice. The feather's warmth intensifies, and where its tip touches the frozen surface, tiny droplets of water begin to form. Yes, Running Wolf murmurs, the falcon flies between worlds. Ice is just water that has forgotten how to flow. Morning Star moves the feather slowly across the ice, watching as it leaves a trail of liquid in its wake. The pattern becomes clear to her now. Like creating a design in her weaving, she needs to follow the natural flow, the inherent structure that exists within the seemingly solid barrier. She begins to draw with the feather, tracing the lines. She sees beneath the surface. Water trickles down in rivulets that form their own patterns, each drop catching light and throwing it back in rainbow fragments. The images of her past blur and run together, becoming nothing more than colors in a larger design. The ice begins to sing, a high crystal tone that reminds her of starlight and mountain winds. Where her patterns connect, the wall starts to transform. Not melting exactly, but changing state in a way she's never seen before, becoming something between ice and water, solid and liquid. The spring recognizes its own, Running Wolf says softly. You see now, the barrier was never the ice. It was the weight of the stories you told yourself about who you are and who you could never be. Morning Star continues her work, the patterns flowing from her hands as naturally as when she weaves. The ice wall responds, its structure shifting and flowing until finally a passage appears, not carved or melted, but transformed, as if the ice has learned a new way to exist. Through the opening, she catches her first glimpse of the sacred spring. Steam rises from its surface into the freezing air, carrying scents of minerals and ancient earth. The water bubbles up from somewhere, deep in the mountain's heart, its surface dancing with the same colors she saw in the ice wall. Now comes the true test, Running Wolf says, removing the clay vessel from his hip. The spring's water holds power. Power to heal, power to transform, power to show us truths we hide from ourselves. But it must be gathered with perfect honesty. Any doubt, any lingering shame, any hidden fear will turn its sacred water to simple ice. He hands her the vessel, its surface decorated with spiral patterns that match those on her walking staff. Are you ready to see yourself as the ancestors see you, as White Feather sees you? As the spirit of the mountain sees you? Morning Star holds the vessel, feeling its ancient power thrumming against her palms. The spring beckons, its waters dancing with possibilities. Above them, a falcon circles in the morning sky, its cry echoing off the canyon walls like a welcome, like a challenge, like a promise. Morning Star kneels at the spring's edge, the clay vessel steady in her hands despite the magnitude of the moment. Steam rises around her in shifting curtains, carrying whispers that sound almost like voices. The water before her moves with its own rhythm, colors dancing beneath its surface like aurora lights trapped in glass. As she dips the vessel toward the water, something catches her eye, a reflection but not her own. In the spring's sacred waters, she sees a young woman in ceremonial dress, proud and strong, performing a ritual she's never witnessed before. It takes her a moment to realize she's seeing White Feather in her youth. The vision shifts and clarifies. Young White Feather stands before the tribal council, her voice carrying through time. The old ways are not chains to bind us, but roots to help us grow. Each generation must find its own branches, its own way to reach toward the sky. The scene changes again. Now White Feather weaves at a loom unlike any Morning Star has seen. Its frame seems made of starlight. Its threads shimmer with power. And watching her work is a young warrior, his face unlined by time but unmistakable. Running Wolf, Morning Star breathes, understanding blooming like dawn. Yes, he answers softly. I was not just her student, I was her son. The revelation ripples through Morning Star like a stone dropped in still water. She turns to look at him, seeing now what she had missed before, the same quiet strength, the same way of seeing beyond the surface of things. My father was a great warrior, Running Wolf continues, his voice carrying the weight of memory. He died defending our lands from those who would take them. The tribe expected me to follow his path, to be the kind of warrior he was. When I failed, when fear gripped me in battle, they saw it as a betrayal of his legacy. In the spring's waters, the images continued to flow. Young Running Wolf, stripped of his warrior name. White Feather, standing before the tribal council, speaking of prophecies and different kinds of strength. The sacred ceremonies in these same mountains, mother teaching son a new way to be brave. My mother taught me that true courage isn't the absence of fear, Running Wolf says, but the wisdom to transform it into understanding. She showed me that power flows in many channels, not just through the warrior's bow. Morning Star's hands tremble slightly as she finally dips the vessel into the spring. The water that flows into it isn't clear, but rather shimmers with all the colors she'd seen in the ice wall. It feels alive against her skin, like liquid starlight. The vision stone, Running Wolf says, reaching into his medicine pouch and withdrawing a translucent crystal that seems to hold galaxies in its depths. My mother's last gift to me. She said it would show me who to guide next, who would need to learn what she taught me. He holds the stone up to the morning light. Within its facets, Morning Star sees herself, not as she is now, but as she could be. She stands before the tribe, wearing ceremonial robes decorated with patterns that seem to move of their own accord. In her hands, she holds not a wedding blanket, but something far more powerful, a weaving that bridges worlds. When Swift Arrow rejected you, Running Wolf says, he acted not from the ancestors' wisdom, but from fear. Fear of change, fear of power that flows through channels he doesn't understand. The dreams he spoke of were real, but he misread their meaning. They weren't warnings against you. They were warnings against the blindness of clinging too tightly to old ways of seeing. The falcon that had been circling above them descends, landing on a nearby rock, its eyes bright as stars, fix upon Morning Star with ancient intelligence. In its presence, she feels the weight of generations, not as a burden, but as a foundation, upon which to build something new. My mother's prophecy spoke of one who would come in a time of transition, Running Wolf continues, one who would weave together the strength of tradition with the necessity of change. The tribal council fears such change. They see only the breaking of old patterns, not the creation of new ones. Morning Star lifts the filled vessel from the spring, its contents still dancing with impossible colors. What you're saying? It's more than just about me, isn't it? It's about the tribe itself, about our future. Running Wolf nods, a smile touching his weathered face. The same council that judges you now once judged me, judged my mother. They believe strength flows only in straight lines, like arrows in flight. But you and I, we know different. We've seen how power moves in spirals, in patterns, in the spaces between what is and what could be. The falcon launches itself from its perch, climbing high into the morning sky. As it wheels overhead, its cry echoes off the canyon walls, not a single sound, but a harmony, as if multiple birds call at once. The sound sends shivers through Morning Star's spirit. The tribe must learn what my mother tried to teach them. Running Wolf says, watching the falcon's flight, that our traditions are not rigid walls, but flowing streams, that our strength lies not in refusing to change, but in knowing how to change while keeping our essential truths. He turns to her, his eyes bright with purpose. This is why the ancestors guided me to you, not just to save you from your grief, but because you carry within you the power to help our people find a new way forward. Your weaving, your ability to see patterns where others see only chaos. These are not mere crafts, but bridges between worlds. Morning Star looks down at the vessel in her hands, at the sacred water that seems to hold all possibilities within its depths. She thinks of her unfinished grave in the snow, of Swift Arrow's rejection, of all the whispers and judgments. But now these memories feel different, not weights to drag her down, but experiences that have prepared her for something larger than herself. The falcon circles once more and disappears into the morning sun, its cry lingering in the air like a blessing, like a challenge, like a promise of things to come. The sacred water moves in its vessel as Morning Star and Running Wolf make their way back through the transformed ice wall. A sudden wind whips down the canyon, carrying with it the sharp crack of breaking branches. At their feet lies a broken arrow, its shaft split cleanly in two, not by impact, but by the intense cold. Running Wolf picks up the arrow pieces, examining them with eyes that see beyond the physical. Cedar wood, he says softly, from the sacred grove where Swift Arrow's family has cut their arrow shafts for generations. He runs his finger along the split. But look here, the grain tells a different story than what we've been told. Morning Star kneels beside him, her weaver's eye naturally finding patterns in the wood's structure. The arrow's grain spirals in an unusual way, revealing a flaw hidden beneath the surface. It was weak, she says. It would have shattered if used. Yes. Running Wolf's voice carries a weight of understanding, just like the stories Swift Arrow's family has been telling. He looks up at the sky, where storm clouds gather with supernatural speed. The time for truth has come. Your rejection was never about you, Morning Star. It was about power and fear. He reaches into his medicine pouch and withdraws a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. As he unfolds it, Morning Star sees dried plants she recognizes, sacred herbs used in the fever season, the same medicines that had failed to save her father. "Your father was a healer," Running Wolf says, his words carrying through the rising wind. He knew the old ways, the true ways of using these plants. But Swift Arrow's family, they have been diluting the medicines, keeping the most potent parts for themselves, selling the rest to white traders. The revelation hits Morning Star like a physical blow. But the fever season, those who died, your father discovered their secret. He confronted Black Bear, Swift Arrow's father, demanding they stop this desecration of sacred medicines. The next day, he fell ill. The medicines they gave him were purposely weakened. They let him die to protect their secret. Thunder rolls through the canyon like the voice of judgment itself. The sacred water in Morning Star's vessel begins to glow, responding to the truth being unveiled. Swift Arrow knew, Running Wolf continues. His dreams were not warnings from the ancestors. They were manifestations of his guilt. He couldn't go through with the marriage because he knew his family had murdered your father. The tribal council. He pauses, grief and anger mingling in his voice. Some of them know the truth as well, but Black Bear's influence runs deep. The broken arrow in his hands suddenly feels heavy with meaning, a symbol of corruption hidden beneath a veneer of tradition. Morning Star thinks of all the families who lost loved ones in the fever season, of the weakened medicines that should have saved them. "My mother saw this coming," Running Wolf says. Her prophecy wasn't just about preserving traditions or finding new paths. It was about exposing the rot that threatens to destroy our people from within. Those who twist the old ways for their own gain must be brought into the light. A falcon's cry pierces the gathering storm, the same bird from the sacred spring, now wheeling against the dark clouds. Its voice seems to carry White Feather's wisdom. The greatest patterns often begin with a broken thread. Morning Star stands, the sacred water glowing brighter in her hands, the carved staff thrumming with power against her palm. She thinks of her father, of his gentle hands sorting healing herbs, of his dedication to helping others. The pain of his loss transforms within her, becoming something else, not a weight to carry but a fire to light the way forward. "What must be done?" she asks, her voice steady despite the storm that builds around them. Running Wolf rises. Beside her, the broken arrow pieces held like evidence before the court of ancestors themselves. The truth must be woven into a pattern that cannot be denied. Your gift, Morning Star, your ability to see and create patterns, it's not just for making blankets, it's for revealing what has been hidden, for showing our people a path back to what is right and true. The storm breaks over the mountains with supernatural fury as Morning Star and Running Wolf descend toward the tribal encampment. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating the ceremonial grounds where the council's lodge stands dark against the gathering dusk. Around the elder's medallion hanging outside the lodge entrance, the wind whips with particular intensity, making the sacred symbols etched on its surface seem to dance. Two figures emerge from the swirling snow, Swift Arrow and his father Black Bear, returning from a trading journey. Their faces show first surprise, then fear as they recognize Running Wolf. Black Bear's hand moves to the knife at his belt. "The ghost returns," Black Bear says, his voice carrying false bravado. "Have you come to fail your people again, Broken Stone?" Running Wolf stands tall, his presence somehow matching the mountain's own strength. "I come as my mother's son," he declares, his voice carrying over the wind. "I am Running Wolf, child of White Feather, and I bring truth before the council." The name sends whispers through the gathering crowd. White Feather's legacy still holds power, even among those who had rejected her teachings. Black Bear's face darkens like the storm clouds above. "Call the council," Running Wolf commands, and such is the authority in his voice that even Black Bear cannot refuse. The drum sounds, summoning the tribal elders. Inside the council lodge, lit by flickering fires, Morning Star stands beside Running Wolf as he presents the broken arrow and the sacred herbs. The vessel of sacred water glows softly in her hands, its light revealing faces in the shadows. Some afraid, some angry, some heavy with guilty knowledge. You speak of dreams and warnings, Running Wolf addresses Swift Arrow, who cannot meet his gaze. But the true dreams, the true warnings came from your own conscience. You knew what your family had done to Morning Star's father. Swift Arrow's shoulders slump, the weight of truth finally too heavy to bear. The medicines, he whispers. Father said it was for the good of the tribe, that trading with the white men would make us strong. But the diluted herbs, those who died. His voice breaks. Black Bear surges to his feet. You dare return here spreading lies? You who abandoned your warrior's path? I abandoned nothing, Running Wolf responds calmly. I found a kind of strength, as my mother taught me, as Morning Star will teach others, if you can overcome your fear of change. The sacred water in Morning Star's vessel suddenly flares bright as starfire. In its light, she sees the patterns of corruption and healing, of endings and beginnings, as clearly as any design she's ever woven. Without conscious thought, her hands begin to move, pouring the water in a spiral pattern on the earthen floor. Where the water touches, it leaves traces of light that form images, scenes from the fever season, the weakened medicines, secret meetings with traders, her father's final days. The truth reveals itself in patterns that cannot be denied. My father was a healer. Morning Star's voice rings out, strong and clear. He died because he discovered your betrayal of our sacred ways. You thought to bury that truth beneath whispers of curses and ill omens, but the ancestors do not allow such darkness to remain hidden forever. Thunder shakes the lodge. Through the smoke hole, a falcon's cry pierces the storm. The council members stir, ancient knowledge awakening in their eyes as they recognize the signs of spirit world intervention. Black Bear makes one last attempt to retain control. Who will you believe? He demands. A failed warrior and a rejected bride, or those who have kept our people strong? But his words fall empty as Morning Star steps forward, touched by the light of the sacred water, her father's healing spirit visible around her like an aura. In that moment, she is no longer the shamed woman who carved her grave in ice, but something more, a bridge between old wisdom and new vision, exactly as White Feather's prophecy foretold. Dawn breaks over a divided tribe. The council lodge stands empty after the night's revelations, its fire reduced to glowing embers that mirror the tension smoldering through the camp. Morning Star sits in her mother's lodge, grinding sacred ochre into war paint, while Grey Dove weaves protective symbols into her daughter's hair. Your father spoke of change coming, Grey Dove says softly, her fingers working with practiced grace. He said our people stood at a crossroads, like a river choosing its path down the mountain. She pauses, touching the falcon feather that still radiates warmth. He would be proud to see you standing in your power. Outside, they hear Black Bear's voice rallying his supporters. The trading of sacred medicines has brought wealth to certain families, creating bonds that will not easily break. The camp has split into factions, those who support the old true ways and those who profit from their corruption. Running Wolf enters the lodge, carrying items wrapped in ceremonial leather. Black Bear calls for a trial by tradition, he announces, his voice grave. He claims the right to challenge these accusations before the ancestors themselves. Morning Star's hand still over the ochre. What does this mean? It means, Running Wolf says, unwrapping his bundle, that truth must be proven through ceremony. The trial will take place at dusk, at the sacred circle where the three peaks cast their shadows. He reveals what the leather contained. White Feather's ceremonial implements, tools for walking between worlds. But I don't know the ceremonies, Morning Star protests, fear flickering in her chest. I'm a weaver, not a medicine woman. Running Wolf kneels beside her, taking her paint-stained hands in his. What is ceremony but a pattern woven in time and space? What is sacred power but the ability to see how all things connect? He places a small object in her palm, a crystal that seems to hold starlight in its depths. This is the heart of ice that White Feather used in her most powerful workings. It shows the truth of things, no matter how deeply hidden. Morning Star holds the crystal up to the morning light. Within its facets, she sees fragments of visions, her father working with healing herbs, Black Bear meeting with traders in secret, Swift Arrow wrestling with his conscience. But more than that, she sees patterns connecting everything, flowing like rivers of light between past and present, tradition and transformation. Grey Dove touches the crystal gently. I remember when White Feather used this in the ceremony that made Running Wolf a different kind of warrior. It showed the tribe that strength flows in many channels. Her eyes meet her daughter's. Now it will help you show them a new way forward. They spend the day in preparation. Morning Star learns the sacred songs, their rhythms surprisingly familiar. To her weaver's heart, Running Wolf teaches her the movements of power, how to stand rooted like a mountain while flowing like wind. The crystal never leaves her presence, growing warmer with each passing hour. As the sun begins its descent, supporters gather at their lodge. Among them is Swift Arrow, his face marked with the ash of mourning and repentance. "I cannot undo what my family has done," he says, offering Morning Star a bundle of uncut healing herbs, "but I can help restore what was broken." Morning Star accepts the herbs, seeing in them not just medicine, but the possibility of healing deeper wounds within the tribe. She begins to paint the sacred symbols on her skin, not the traditional warrior markings, but patterns that come to her like designs in weaving, spirals of continuity, lines of connection, dots of individual moments joining to create a larger whole. Running Wolf watches her work with approval. "You understand now," he says. "The trial is not just about exposing Black Bear's crimes, it's about showing our people that change and tradition can strengthen each other, like threads woven together." The crystal pulses against her chest, where it hangs from a leather cord. In its depths, Morning Star sees herself as she truly is, not a rejected bride, not a victim of others' schemes, but a weaver of new possibilities. The last light of day penetrates the lodge, casting her shadow against the wall. In its shape, she sees not just herself, but all the strong women who have come before her, White Feather, her mother, the grandmothers reaching back to the tribe's beginning. It is time. The sacred circle lies nestled between three towering peaks, their shadows stretching like fingers across the snow. As Morning Star walks toward this ancient place of power, she feels the weight of generations moving with her. Behind her come those who have chosen to stand for truth. Her mother Grey Dove, Swift Arrow, with his head bowed in humble acceptance, and others who have been touched by her father's healing work over the years. Running Wolf walks beside her, carrying a shield so old its surface has turned the color of midnight sky. "This belonged to the first of our people who learned to walk between worlds," he explains. "The designs carved here are older than our oldest stories. They say it holds the power to protect not just the body, but the spirit." Morning Star studies the shield's patterns with her artist's eye. Like her own weaving, they tell stories within stories, but these speak of transformations so profound they reshape reality itself. The crystal at her throat resonates with the shield's ancient power, creating harmonies she feels in her bones. At the circle's edge, Black Bear and his followers wait. Their faces are painted with aggressive symbols, their postures rigid with defensive pride. But Morning Star sees beyond this display, noting how some of them shift uneasily, how their eyes hold shadows of doubt. "Look there," Running Wolf murmurs, indicating the way the last sunlight plays across the snow. The shadows of the three peaks meet at the circle's heart. When the trial begins, their powers will awaken. Are you ready? Morning Star touches the crystal, feeling its warmth pulse through her. She thinks of her father's gentle hands sorting herbs, of White Feather's prophecy, of all the threads that have woven together to bring her to this moment. "I am ready," she says, and her voice carries echoes of ancient strength. Swift Arrow steps forward, his voice carrying across the gathering crowd. Before this begins, all should know the full truth. He holds up a medicine pouch, his father's personal supply. These are the pure herbs, kept separate from what we traded. Let all see how we betrayed our own people's trust. Black Bear's face contorts with rage and something else, fear. Morning Star realizes. Fear of change, fear of losing power, fear of the truth itself. He reaches for his son, but Swift Arrow stands firm, supported by the weight of his chosen path. The crowd stirs, whispers rising like wind through winter branches. Morning Star sees the moment building, feels the patterns of power gathering like storm clouds. She removes her father's bone needle, the one he used to sort healing herbs, from her hair and holds it up to the fading light. "We stand in the shadows of our sacred peaks," she declares, her voice carrying the strength of newfound purpose. "We stand where our ancestors gathered to seek truth, to find paths forward, to weave the future from threads of the past. I call upon their wisdom to guide us now." The crystal flares bright against her throat, the shadows of the three peaks touch her feet, and she feels their power rise through her body like sap through a spring tree. Around the circle, witnesses gasp as the air itself seems to thicken with spiritual presence. Running Wolf raises the ancient shield, its patterns beginning to glow with inner light. "The trial of tradition begins," he announces. "Let all who stand here remember that the ancestors see beyond deception, beyond fear, beyond the masks we wear before each other." Morning Star takes her position in the circle's heart, where the three shadows meet. The paint on her skin, her own designs merged with sacred symbols, begins to shimmer. She feels White Feather's presence like a warm wind, her father's spirit like a healing touch, all the strength of her people's true traditions flowing through her. Black Bear steps forward to face her, his face a mask of defiance. But there in the sacred circle, with power gathering like a storm about to break, Morning Star sees him clearly at last, not as a mighty elder to be feared, but as a man trapped by his own choices, desperately clinging to control, even as it slips away like snow in spring thaw. The sun touches the mountain peaks. The trial is about to begin. The last ray of sunlight vanishes behind the peaks, and the sacred circle transforms. The snow beneath Morning Star's feet begins to glow with an inner light, tracing ancient patterns that have been carved into the rock beneath over countless generations. The lightning stone in her medicine pouch pulses in rhythm with these awakening powers. Black Bear strikes first, not with physical force, but with words of power meant to bind and weaken. He raises his arms, voice thundering, "I call upon the ancestors to witness. This woman brings chaos to our traditions, seeks to unravel the very fabric of our ways." But as his words echo across the circle, Morning Star feels something strange. The patterns in the snow begin to shift, responding not to Black Bear's command, but to the deeper truth in her heart. The crystal at her throat flares bright, and suddenly she sees the spirit world overlaid upon the physical. Ancestral figures gather around the circle's edge, their forms shimmering like heat waves in summer air. Among them stands White Feather, her presence radiant with power, and beside her Morning Star's breath catches her father, his kind eyes filled with pride and purpose. "You speak of tradition," Morning Star responds, her voice carrying harmonics that make the very air vibrate. "But what is tradition, if not the wisdom of change? What is strength, if not the courage to grow?" As she speaks, she begins to move in patterns that mirror her weaving, her hands drawing symbols of power in the air that leave trails of light. Black Bear snarls and pulls from his robe a sacred rattle, one used in the old warrior ceremonies. Its sound cuts through the night like breaking ice, calling forth spirits of battle and conquest. Dark shapes begin to form in the shadows between the peaks, answering his summons. But Morning Star stands firm. The lightning stone pulses again, and she understands its purpose. Like a weaver choosing threads, she begins to gather strands of light from the glowing patterns beneath her feet. The crystal amplifies her power, transforming the light into something more, threads of reality itself. "Watch!" Running Wolf calls to the gathered tribe. "Watch and remember how White Feather showed us that power flows in many forms." Morningstar's fingers move with practiced grace, weaving the light threads into patterns that tell the truth of what has happened. The corrupted medicines, the secret trades, the murders hidden behind whispers of curses. Each image forms. In the air between her and Black Bear, undeniable in its clarity, the dark spirits Black Bear summoned recoil from these patterns of truth. His rattle's power wavers, its sound becoming discordant. In desperation, he reaches for his knife, its blade dark with old magic. "You think your weaving can stand against the warrior's way?" he shouts, slashing at her light-woven images, "against the strength that has protected our people for generations." But where his blade meets her patterns, something unexpected happens. The light doesn't shatter. It absorbs the blade's darkness, transforming it, weaving it into a new design. Morningstar feels White Feather's wisdom flowing through her. Creation is stronger than destruction. Pattern holds more power than chaos. "I show you truth, woven from your own actions," Morningstar declares, her hands never stopping their intricate dance. "I show you how the old ways and the new must be woven together, like the sacred patterns in our blankets, like the cycles of the seasons themselves." The ancestral spirits draw closer, their presence intensifying the circle's power. Morningstar sees her father step forward, his spirit form carrying the herbs he once used to heal. She sees White Feather raise her hands in blessing. She sees generations of tribal wisdom gathered to witness this moment of transformation. Black Bear strikes again with his blade, but now its magic is fading, absorbed into Morningstar's weaving. The truth pattern grows larger, more complex, encompassing the entire circle. In its light, all can see the choices that led them here. The small compromises, the hidden greed, the fear of change that allowed corruption to take root. The lightning stone blazes like a captured star. The crystal at her throat sings with pure tones that make the mountains themselves resonate. And Morningstar continues to weave, transforming darkness into light, fear into understanding, ending into beginning. The patterns Morningstar weaves fill the sacred circle with living light, each thread a story, each intersection a truth that cannot be denied. Black Bear stands at the circle's edge, his knife's magic completely absorbed into her weaving, his face a mask of conflicting emotions as he watches his carefully constructed world unravel. A flash of movement catches Morningstar's eye. Swift Arrow steps into the circle, removing his warrior's necklace. "Father," he says, his voice steady with newfound strength, "I add my truth to hers." He takes a strand of light from Morningstar's weaving, and with it shows his own memories. The quiet conversations about diluting medicines, the midnight meetings with traders, the weight of secrets carried too long. Other tribe members begin to step forward, each adding their own threads of truth to the pattern. A mother whose child suffered needlessly during the fever season. An elder who had noticed the weakening of the medicines but feared speaking out. A young warrior who had witnessed Black Bear's secret dealings. The unity bracelet on Morningstar's wrist, a gift from her grandmother, begins to glow with the same light as her weavings. She understands now. Unity doesn't mean blind adherence to tradition, but rather the weaving together of all truths, all experiences, all voices into something stronger than any single thread. "Look," she commands Black Bear, her voice carrying the power of mountains. "Look at what your fear of change has created." The pattern shifts, showing how his actions have weakened not just the medicines, but the very bonds that hold the tribe together. "But look also at what we can become." With a gesture that mirrors her grandmother's teaching of the most sacred weaving patterns, Morningstar transforms the design. The threads of light reshape themselves, showing visions of possibility, the tribe growing stronger through the honest sharing of knowledge, healing practices evolving while honoring their roots, tradition and innovation dancing together like wind and flame. Running Wolf raises the ancient shield, its patterns now pulsing in harmony with Morningstar's weaving. "The ancestors show us their judgment," he declares. "They remind us that our strength lies not in rigid adherence to what was, but in wisdom to know what must be. Black Bear makes one final attempt, reaching toward the spirit world with desperate words of power. But the ancestors themselves respond. White Feather steps forward from their ranks, her spiritual form bright as summer lightning. She gestures, and Black Bear's words fade to silence. The trial is complete, Running Wolf announces. The truth has been woven into a pattern that will not unravel. What say you, Black Bear? Will you accept the ancestors' judgment? For a long moment, the once powerful elder stands frozen. Then, like ice breaking in spring thaw, his shoulders slump. The knife falls from his hand, its blade now nothing more than dull metal. His voice cracks. I accept the judgment. Morning Star feels the power in the circle shift. Her weaving of light begins to stabilize, its patterns sinking into the very rock beneath the snow, becoming part of the sacred circle's eternal design. The crystal at her throat pulses one final time, and she sees clearly what must come next. Our way forward is not through punishment, she declares, but through healing of our tribe, our traditions, and ourselves. She holds out her hand to Black Bear, offering not condemnation but transformation. Help us restore what was damaged. Add your strength to the new pattern we will weave together. The first light of dawn touches the three peaks, and in that moment of transition between night and day, something shifts in the spirit world. The ancestral figures nod in approval. White Feather and Morning Star's father step forward, their spiritual forms beginning to fade with the coming day, but their blessing remains, settling over the circle like fresh snow. The tribe moves forward as one, gathering around Morning Star and Running Wolf. The unity bracelet glows brighter, its pattern a promise of new beginnings. Above them, a falcon wheels in the dawn sky, its cry carrying both victory and challenge. For while this battle is won, the greater work of transformation is just beginning. As morning light fills the sacred circle, the tribe begins its journey home. But this return is different from any before. The procession moves not in separate groups, marked by status and family allegiance, but as one people united by shared truth and purpose. Morning Star walks at its center, the crystal still, warm at her throat, her ceremonial blanket now adorned with patterns that seem to shift and move in the dawn light. Black Bear walks beside her, his warrior's pride transformed into something deeper, the humility of one who has seen truth and chosen to change. Together, they carry the restored medicines, their combined knowledge promising stronger healing than either could achieve alone. At the camp, the council lodge is swept clean and smudged with sage. New stories are added to its walls, not just of battles won and honors earned, but of transformation, of wisdom found in unexpected places, of strength discovered in the act of changing. Morning Star's weaving becomes the first of these new tales, her patterns a bridge between old ways and new vision. The real work, she tells those gathered, begins now. And in her voice, they hear not just her own wisdom, but echoes of White Feather's prophecy and her father's healing spirit. One full moon later, the spirit drum that had fallen silent at Morning Star's failed wedding beats again, its rhythm carrying new songs across the valley. The tribal gathering celebrates not a marriage, but a different kind of union, the naming of a new spiritual leader. Morning Star stands before her people, wearing a robe woven with patterns that bridge worlds. The designs tell the story of her journey, from the grave she carved in ice to the sacred circle where truth transformed darkness into light. At her throat, the crystal pulses in harmony with the drum's heartbeat. Running Wolf performs the blessing ceremony, passing to her the sacred implements that once belonged to his mother. White Feather saw this day, he says, his voice carrying pride and certainty. She saw how the pattern would emerge, how tradition and change would weave together through your hands. As if in answer, a great eagle descends from the bright winter sky, landing on a nearby pine. In its presence, Morning Star feels the approval of the ancestors, the strength of her father's healing legacy, and the promise of new patterns yet to be woven. The drum's rhythm shifts, and the tribe moves as one, dancing steps that honor both the old ways and the new path they now walk together. Above them, the eagle spreads its wings, and in that moment, Morning Star knows this is not an ending, but a beginning. As fresh and full of possibility as the first snow of winter, 3 moons have passed since the naming ceremony. The first signs of spring touch the Chiricahua Mountains, snow retreating like a tide to reveal tender green shoots. Beneath, Morning Star sits at her loom in the medicine lodge, weaving a blanket unlike any the tribe has seen before. Into its fabric, she works both traditional patterns and new designs born from her journey. Sacred symbols flow into innovative forms that tell the story of transformation. Healing herbs, gathered with Black Bear's renewed knowledge, and blessed by her own spiritual understanding, lay carefully sorted beside her, their properties enhanced by the union of old wisdom and new insights. Young women gather to watch her work, among them Swift Arrow's sister Little Rain. Their eyes follow her fingers dance across the threads, learning how pattern and power intertwine. Each weaving is a bridge, Morning Star teaches them, between what was and what could be. The crystal at her throat pulses warmly as she guides her students through the sacred patterns. In it, she catches glimpses of White Feather's approving smile, feels her father's healing spirit in the way the herbs respond to her touch. The tribe's ways are changing, but their core strength remains unbroken, like a river changing course. While keeping its essential nature, Running Wolf visits often, sharing more of his mother's teachings, helping Morning Star bridge the space between warrior wisdom and healer's knowledge. Together, they create new ceremonies that honor both tradition and transformation, watched over by the falcon that has made its nest in the highest peak above their camp. And somewhere in the mountains, beneath the melting snow, a grave carved in ice stands empty, not as a symbol of death, but as a marker of rebirth, a reminder that even in winter's deepest heart, spring's promise waits to be reborn. As summer approaches the Chiricahua Mountains, Morning Star stands at the sacred circle where her transformation began. The snow has long since melted, revealing the ancient patterns carved in stone, now joined by her own weaving designs, permanently etched into the circle's story. She carries a special burden today, White Feather's final teachings, transcribed, not in words, but in woven patterns that shimmer with inherited power. Running Wolf stands beside her, his mother's spirit strong in the wisdom he shares. Together, they have gathered the tribe to witness the completion of a cycle. Black Bear approaches, changed by the seasons of atonement. In his hands, he carries the pure medicines, restored to their true strength. His son, Swift Arrow, walks at his side, both men now dedicated to preserving and renewing their people's healing traditions. The divide that once split the tribe has been woven into a stronger whole, like strands of light transformed into Morning Star's patterns. The crystal at her throat pulses one final time, and in its depths she sees all the patterns yet to come. Generations of her people adapting, growing, transforming, while keeping their essential truth alive. Above, the falcon wheels in an eternal dance with the eagle, their paths writing wisdom across the endless sky. Morning Star raises her hands, and the eternal pattern continues.